Hi everyone, this is Ben Lincoln from Legacy of Kain, The Lost Worlds. This video presents a walkthrough of the Undercity area that was originally attached to the human citadel. In early versions of Soul Reaver's design, the citadel included a temple of vampire worshippers, and Raziel would have used the Undercity to infiltrate that temple and there fight the Priestess who led that sect. This layout of the citadel should look familiar so far, with a few exceptions. As we discovered from these prototypes, the exterior of the temple is still mostly present in the final version of the game, but the interior was removed along with the Undercity. The Undercity you're seeing assembled here is from the 4 February prototype of the game. This version of the Undercity has 3 unfinished pipes leading further into the depths. We're not sure if those were supposed to lead to bonus areas or other parts of the puzzle, but they were removed by the 16th of February. Reaching the Undercity would have begun outside the water tower area in the Citadel. In the final version of the game, this corridor eventually leads to the repurposed Spirit Glyph area, which houses a health bonus instead. In this early prototype, this is where Raziel would have begun to encounter the mysterious figures of the temple, although only one is present here. Around this corner, the outside of the temple is visible on the right. Most of this exterior is still present in the game as it was released, but make a note of the tower attached at the corner, which we'll revisit later in this video. In early versions of the game, this water channel leads to a large reservoir, which is too deep to escape from. The only option is to proceed into the pipe, which leads to the Undercity. The main chamber of the Undercity may be familiar from a few screenshots published before the game was released. Its appearance was based on Giovanni Piranesi's Carceri prints made in the 1700s. The same artwork would later inspire the treasure vault level of the first Uncharted game on the PlayStation 3. The layout of the Undercity is somewhat confusing because of overlapping geometry near the middle of the layout you see here. In these rendered animations, I've split it into 2 versions, each containing one of those 2 overlapping branches. The player's first stop is in the lower right corner of this image, because the upper reaches of the main chamber are unreachable at first. This section of the Undercity includes an unfinished warp gate, and the first of 3 water control mechanisms, which are the key to progressing. The appearance of the water mechanisms changes between prototypes. This is how it looks in the build from 4 February 1999. This is the same waterway in the 16 February prototype. I'm mostly using footage from that version in this video, except where one of the others is more functional. The core approach for all 3 mechanisms is identical. The player needs to hold down a lever until the water level rises, then use a block to jam the mechanism open so that the water level doesn't drop. In this first area, the necessary block is within easy reach, so that the player can become familiar with the concept. In this version of the area, the animation for the mechanism is more complete, and you can see the slot that the block would go into once the water level reaches the top. I've used rendered animations to help illustrate this puzzle, because the prototypes we're examining are only partly complete. The water level wouldn't have risen quite as far as it does in these animations, but it's easier to see this way, especially on a smaller screen. With the first mechanism open, the main chamber has now begun to flood. However, it's not quite enough to actually reach the next area. We think that there's a missing element here, such as climbable wall patches or ledges which would extend in the spectral realm. This grate is the exit for the second waterway, which has to be entered from further up. Since that's not possible without cheating in this version of the Undercity, cheating is exactly what I'm going to do. This tunnel leads to the first water mechanism that requires solving a puzzle in order to access the necessary push block, although in the prototype versions of the game, there's one here already for developers and testers to use. The room is large, and we haven't determined yet how most of the puzzle would work, although the final section is clear enough. The player would need to move 2 push blocks to the base of this enclosed area, stack the blocks, stand on the top block, and phase through the bars in the spectral realm. There's only 1 block here in the prototype, but because of non-strict collision detection, it's possible to approximate the result with just 1 block. After phasing through, the player can push the block down to the area with a lever, and then complete this phase of the Undercity. This hole in the wall is somewhat mysterious. It doesn't lead anywhere, and we're not sure why it's present. Completing this room raises the water in the main chamber a second time, and would have allowed the player to reach the third mechanism, although again, it's not possible without cheating in the prototypes we recovered. The room for the third mechanism is at least as mysterious as the second. It's a tall space with a freestanding tower in the center. Because this is an unfinished version of a deleted area, there are a number of technical problems, such as the water level being much higher than it appears visually. The final puzzle room has a strange issue. In the material realm, a sort of earthquake effect is always present, and a bolt of energy repeatedly strikes Raziel. Rather than deal with this, I'm going to shift into the spectral realm, but make a note of the way this effect looks. Clearly, the goal in this room is to reach the top of the tower, but we've been unable to determine how that was intended to occur, especially given the torch in the middle of the room. Once at the top of the tower, the player could proceed to knock a push block down to the water mechanism platform. Like most objects in these early prototypes, the push block is not affected by the force projectile, so I've cheated and pushed it down while standing in midair. With the water level raised a final time in the main chamber, the temple would now be accessible, although, like the other sections of the Undercity, it cannot be reached in the prototypes without cheating. Based on developer descriptions of the Undercity, we think that the Priestess was actually supposed to be located on one of the upper levels of the temple, controlling vampires that would fight Raziel at the bottom. This is probably what the alcoves along the walls contained. The Priestess model is present in the 16 February build, but the battle with her is not implemented, as you can see. Her skirt is based on the early version of the vampire worshipper robes seen in these prototypes, but her upper body is covered with tattoos of the vampire clan symbols. Her headdress even has a tiny version of Raziel's emblem on the back, despite him having been cast down long before meeting her. Kain's symbol is missing, but it was also one of the last to be designed, so may not have existed when this prototype was created. Kevin Chapmaho has been working to unlock the additional animations in the data for the Priestess, and will probably have videos showing them off by the time you see this one. All of us are going to be investigating further to see if unfinished versions of the cinematics for the Priestess are hidden away in these prototypes. The Priestess can be killed in this prototype, but doing so has no special effect. Somewhat surprisingly, her model can also be picked up and thrown. Sometimes, the earthquake and energy bolt from the third puzzle room appear in the temple, with the bolt originating from the upper reaches, where we think the Priestess was supposed to be located. We're not sure if this means that the Priestess would have appeared in that puzzle room as well, or if there's another reason. This version of the Undercity is too incomplete to be sure. The upper story of the temple is empty in all of the prototypes we recovered. However, there's a doorway which is not connected anywhere in any of those builds. In this rendered view, it's in one corner of the second story. Using the Blender conversion toolchain, it's possible to see that with all of the Citadel and Undercity assembled, this doorway would almost certainly have led into the tower attached to the corner of the temple's exterior. We think this was how Raziel would have returned to the Citadel after defeating the Priestess, by jumping from a window high in that tower. Thanks for watching!